1 cart per household. I'm sorry, ma'am. That's the limit, and I can't bend it, Jew. Not even for you.
It's all right, I understand. I'll put some back.
You don't have to put it all back. The household max is 1 cart, that's all. I wish it wasn't.
I know. It's not your fault.
Can my mom have my turn?
He stepped up beside the woman and looked at the lady with the clipboard with a seriousness that had no business on a face that young.
I don't need mine. I already had breakfast. Can my mom have my turn instead so she doesn't have to put the food back?
Give her mine.
My whole turn. Everything I'm allowed today. Put it in her cart. Sir, I can't just double a household. There are 40 families behind you, and the shelves are already... Then I'll take them next door and buy it myself. The man's voice wasn't loud. It had gone quiet and flat, the way a thing goes right before it breaks the surface. But that boy is not putting his mother's food back. Not while I'm standing here. Just tell me where the store is. The woman with the clipboard was named Sandra Vaughn, and she had spent 20 years standing between hungry people and shelves that ran out by 10, gentle and immovable at once. And in all that time, the ones who broke her heart were never the ones who argued. It was the ones who just went quiet and started putting things back. The mother was Simone Carver, thin, straight-backed, a diner name tag still pinned to her coat like she'd come off a shift and straight into this line. The boy was her son, Andre, and the man stepping out of line, 38 years old and at a food bank for the first time in his life, was Shane Delaney, who had spent every one of the 90 minutes he'd stood in it praying that nobody he knew would walk through the door, and who felt, when the boy spoke, something tear loose in his chest that he would never quite be able to name. To understand why a man with nothing gave away everything, you have to understand what it had cost Shane Delaney just to walk through that door in the first place. 8 months. The plant had run for 60 years, and then a man in another state did some math, and one Friday in March they'd handed 900 people a folder and a handshake, and Shane Delaney had gone from a man with a trade and a pension to a man refreshing job boards at 2 in the morning. He'd done everything right his whole life. He'd shown up, he'd stayed late, he'd never taken a sick day he didn't earn. And none of it had mattered against a spreadsheet. He was raising his boy alone. Charlie was 9, and his mother had left during the worst of it, not cruelly, just worn down past what she could carry, gone to start over somewhere the rent was lower and the memories were fewer. And Shane didn't blame her the way people expected him to. He just got up every morning and made the boy breakfast and walked him to school and then spent the day being quietly terrified. And here was the thing that had kept him out of that food bank line for 2 months longer than his cupboards could afford. His father. Hank Delaney was 68 years old and had poured steel for 40 of them, and he had raised his son on one iron commandment, repeated across a lifetime of kitchen tables. A Delaney doesn't take charity. We don't take a nickel we didn't earn. You want to know if a man's a man, you watch what he does when it gets hard. Does he stand on his own 2 feet? Or does he put his hand out? Hank had said it so many times it had grown into Shane's bones. And so Shane had not told his father he'd lost the job. 8 months, and every Sunday dinner, Shane sat across from the old man and lied with his whole face because he would rather have starved, and he was, quietly, starving, than watch his father look at him and see a man with his hand out. Every Sunday, it was the same performance. Shane would iron the one good shirt and put on the face. "How's the plant treating you?" Hank asked, every week, because to Hank, a man and his work were the same sentence. "Can't complain. Busy. They've got us running doubles." "Good. Doubles is good. Overtime's how I put your mother in a decent box, God rest her." Hank would point his fork. "You putting some away? Man your age with a boy, you want 6 months in the bank. You never know when the suits decide to do their arithmetic." And Shane, who had precisely $11 and no plant, and no doubles, and no 6 months, would say, "Working on it, Dad," and pass the potatoes, and hate himself with a completeness that killed what was left of his appetite, which was convenient because there wasn't much food anyway. The worst Sunday was the one where Hank talked about a man from the old local. You remember Pete Sorensen? Laid off when the foundry closed, ended up down at one of those pantries, the church one. Hank shook his head, and there was no cruelty in it, which somehow made it worse. It was just bedrock. Grown man, standing in a line for a handout. I saw him in there once when I dropped off my canned goods, and I couldn't look at him, Shane. Not because I think less of him, because I'd sooner lie down in the road than let anybody see me like that. A Delaney stands on his own 2 feet. Your granddad came over from the other side with nothing in his pockets and never once took a dime he didn't earn. He put that in me. I put it in you. He'd looked at his son with a terrible, tender pride. That's the one thing I know I got right. My boy would never have his hand out. Shane had smiled and agreed and driven home and stood in his dark kitchen a long time. Because he had stood in exactly that line that very Thursday, and you cannot outdrive a voice that lives in your own bones. He kept his father's union pin in his wallet, a little enameled thing, the local number worn nearly smooth. His dad had given it to him when Shane hired on at the plant, pressed it into his palm and said, "Now you're somebody who earns." Shane had carried it every day of his working life. Now it sat in a wallet with $11 and a maxed card, and every time he opened that wallet, the little pin looked up at him like an accusation. There was one more thing, and it was the thing Charlie had started to notice. Shane had quietly stopped eating. He'd been saying it for months. 2 eggs in the pan, and he'd slide both onto his son's plate and stand at the counter with a cup of coffee and say he'd eaten already because there wasn't enough for 2, and a 9-year-old needs to eat, and a grown man can run a long time on coffee and stubbornness. He'd gotten good at it. He'd gotten thin, too. Thin enough that his belt had a new hole in it. He'd punched himself with a nail. But he wore layers, and Charlie was 9, and mostly a 9-year-old sees what you tell him to see. That particular Tuesday had gone like all of them. 2 eggs, both onto Charlie's plate. "You're not eating, Dad." "I already ate, bud. Big lunch yesterday, still full." "You finished that. You've got the spelling test." "DEFINITELY, Charlie recited around a mouthful. "There's a rat hiding in it, definitely. That's my guy." He walked Charlie to school with a hand on the boy's shoulder and came home to the part of the day that had teeth. The laptop, the job boards, the same 40 listings he'd already applied to twice, the cheerful automated rejections that arrived like weather. "Thank you for your interest. We've decided to move forward with other candidates." He'd worked a trade for 20 years, and the machines that ran hiring now wanted a resume that told a story. And Shane didn't have a story, he had a skill, and nobody was buying the skill. By 11, the cupboard math had gotten bad enough that he'd sat in the truck in the driveway a while, both hands on the wheel, doing the thing men like him do, which is calculate, rent, power, the boy's shoes, already too small, the number in the checking account with 1 comma too few. And then he had driven, before he could let himself think about it, to the low brick building on Fuller Street with the paper banner. And he had sat in that parking lot another 20 minutes before he could make his hand open the door, and he had walked in with his cap pulled low like a man going somewhere shameful, and gotten in line behind a woman with a diner name tag and a boy about his own son's age. He'd almost turned around twice. He was still telling himself he could turn around when the boy opened his mouth and asked if his mom could have his turn. That was the man who walked 2 strangers next door to a discount grocery on a gray Tuesday and filled 2 shopping carts to the brim with the last $211 he had in the world. He didn't tell them it was the last of it. He didn't tell them the $211 was Friday's truck payment, the truck being the only way a man in a town with no buses gets to the job interviews 40 minutes away in the city, the truck being, in a real and immediate sense, his family's entire future. He just pushed a cart down each aisle and put in rice and beans and oil and pasta and the cereal with the cartoon tiger, and diapers when he saw the woman glance at them and look away, and he just filled the carts until the money was gone and a little past gone. "Mister!" Andre trailed him, pushing the second cart, which was nearly as tall as he was. "You're putting in too much. My mom's gonna say something." "Your mom's gonna say a lot of things," Shane said. "You keep pushing. She doesn't like taking stuff." "I noticed." Shane put in a second bag of rice. "Can I tell you a secret since we're pushing carts together?" "Okay, I don't like taking stuff either. Hate it. So I get it. But there's a difference between taking and letting somebody give." "You know the difference?" Andre considered this with the enormous seriousness he brought to everything. "No. Yeah, me neither, honestly. Still working it out." Shane added a jar of the peanut butter. "But I think it's got something to do with the person giving. Needing to do it just as bad as the person taking needs the food. You did a brave thing back there, giving up your turn." "It wasn't brave. I wasn't even hungry." Andre pushed the cart another foot and said the next part flat, the way children say the true thing. "My mom's the hungry one. She just won't say it." And Shane Delaney stopped in the middle of the cereal aisle because it had gone straight through him. The woman's name was Simone Carver. She stopped him in the cereal aisle, and her voice was tight. "Stop, please. You have to stop. I can't pay you back. You understand that? I can't ever pay this back. So you have to stop, because I don't take charity," Shane finished. "Yeah, I know. Neither do I." "Then what is this?" Shane looked at the two full carts and at the boy, Andre, who was holding his mother's coat and watching the grown-ups with those two old eyes. And Shane didn't have an answer that fit in a sentence. "I don't know what it is," he said finally. "But it isn't that. Let me get you home. It's cold." She let him because Andre was watching, and because sometimes pride is a coat you can't afford to keep buttoned. But she made him take a bag of the rice back. One bag, a line she needed to draw so she could stand to accept the rest. And Shane understood that too, and let her, because he'd have done the same. They lived 20 minutes out, in the kind of apartment where the heat is a rumor. Simone made him carry the bags up, but she stood in her own kitchen doorway like a sentry, arms crossed, watching him fill the cabinets, letting him do it and hating it in equal measure. And Shane knew that particular arithmetic by heart. "You're about to say something about paying me back," Shane said, stacking cans. "So let's skip it. You won't. I don't want you to. And if you try, I'll feel worse, not better. Deal?" "That's not how it... I know it's not how it's supposed to work. Humor me." He set the Tiger cereal on a low shelf. "My whole life, somebody told me the measure of a man is that he never needs anybody. I'm starting to think that's the biggest lie anyone ever sold a working person." He nodded at the cereal. "Kept it low so Andre can reach it himself. Kids like to get their own." Simone watched this stranger arrange her kitchen like he'd stood in it 100 times, and a little of the starch went out of her shoulders. "You've got a kid," she said. Not a question. "Charlie, 9. He's the reason I'm still standing up." Charlie had a half day, and Shane had brought him along by then, and the two boys, Andre, 8, and Charlie, 9, did what boys do, which is become instant conspirators over a video game with the sound off. And in the kitchen, unpacking 2 carts of groceries into cabinets that echoed, the truth came out the way it does, sideways and from a child. "Andre," Simone called. "Come eat something, baby. There's food now. Eat." "You first," Andre said, not looking up from the game. "Andre." And the boy set down the controller and looked at his mother with an expression that stopped Shane cold, because he had seen it that very morning in a food bank line. That seriousness too big for the face. "You have to eat first," Andre said. "You always say you already ate. You said it yesterday and the day before and the whole week." His voice cracked. A small child's voice trying to hold something enormous. "But you didn't. I watch. You give it to me and Bibi, and you say you already ate, and then you don't. And last week, you fell down in the kitchen and said you were just tired." Tears now, running while he tried to sound grown. "That's why I gave you my turn, so you'd have to eat. Because you never already ate, Mom. You always already ate. The kitchen went very quiet. Simone Carver put her hand on the counter to hold herself up, and Shane Delaney stood in a stranger's kitchen with a bag of rice in his hands and felt the floor tilt, because the boy had just described Shane's own life back to him, word for word, standing in a different kitchen, the very lie Shane told his own son over a single egg every night. He looked at Simone, and Simone looked back at him, and each of them saw the thing the other had been hiding under layers and coffee and pride, and neither of them had to say a word because they were fluent in the same silence. Simone crossed the kitchen and knelt and pulled her son into her, and Andre, who had been so brave, so grown, delivering his terrible small testimony, dissolved back into 8 years old and cried into her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to tell, but you have to eat. You have to." "I know, baby. I know. You didn't do anything wrong. You did the bravest thing anybody's ever done for me." She held his face in both hands. "You take care of me too good. That's supposed to be my job, taking care of you." "We can both do it," Andre said, muffled. "We can take turns." Over her son's head, Simone looked at Shane, wrecked, and Shane looked back, and something passed between two people who had been strangers 20 minutes ago and weren't anymore. "How long?" Shane said quietly. Not a question about her. A question about both of them. Simone's chin came up, that same reflex. Then it came back down. "Since about October," she said. "You?" "Since about October." And that was it. That was the whole conversation. Two parents in a cold kitchen, each of whom had been feeding a lie to a child 3 times a day for months, each of whom had just been caught by a boy who watched more closely than they'd let themselves believe. Simone laughed, a wet, broken sound, and put her face in her hands. "My son gave up his food," she said, "to trick me into eating. What kind of a mother?" "The kind whose kid learned it from watching her," Shane said. "He didn't get that generous from nowhere, Simone. You want to know where an 8-year-old learns to give up his turn? He learns it at your table." She cried then, finally. The way you cry when someone finally sees the thing you've been carrying alone. And Shane did the only useful thing he could think of, which was put a pot of the new rice on the stove and make her sit down and stand there like a sentry until she ate it, where he could see her. He came back that Friday and the Friday after. He told himself it was to return the cooler he'd left, and then to drop off some of Charlie's outgrown clothes for Andre's little sister, Bibi, and then he stopped bothering with reasons. The two boys needed each other, was the truth of it, and maybe the two parents did too. He and Simone talked the way people talk, who've been caught at the same crime, in low voices in the kitchen doorway while the boys played. "Charlie caught me not eating," Shane said one evening. "Same as Andre caught you. 9 years old. Put an egg in the middle of the table and told me the new rule. Eat where he can see me." Simone almost smiled. "They compared notes, you know. Our boys. Andre reports to me what Charlie says you ate. God help us both." "How'd you get here?" she asked, not unkindly. "You don't have to say." So he told her. The plant, the 20 years, the folder and the handshake, the father he couldn't tell. And she told him hers. The husband who got sick and then got gone, the 2 jobs that still didn't cover a 2-bedroom, the exhausting arithmetic of being the only adult in the house. "You know the difference between us, though?" she said. "You get pity, single dad, poor thing, doing his best. Me, I get suspicion, like I must have done something to end up here, like there's a man I ran off." She shook her head. "So I keep my chin up and I don't take charity. And I feed my kids first, and I fall down in the kitchen sometimes. Same as you. Different story the world tells about us. Same coffee for dinner." Shane saw her do the other thing on a Saturday at the pantry, and it rearranged something in him. There was an old man in the line, alone, shaking a little, and when he came up short of what he needed, Simone Carver, who had 2 kids and nothing, took the peanut butter and the loaf of bread out of her own bag and slipped them into his before he could refuse, and said, "I grabbed 2 by mistake. Take it. You'd be doing me a favor." It was the exact lie Shane's own father had once been told by the men who fed a stranger's child, though Shane didn't know that yet. She didn't even stop to think. She gave it from the bottom of her own empty, and Shane understood then that she wasn't a person who took. She was a person who gave and had simply run out. And there is nobody on earth harder to help than a giver who's run dry. He should have felt good driving home. He'd done a thing his father, of all people, had trained the reflex for, even while forbidding the name of it. But $211 was gone, and Friday was Friday, and the future had a payment due. The consequences came fast, the way they do when you're already at the edge. The truck went first. Shane had known it would. You don't skip the payment on a repossession clause loan and keep the truck. But knowing didn't soften it. A man came on Thursday with a flatbed and a clipboard and was decent enough about it, which almost made it worse. And Shane stood in his own driveway and watched his only way to the city's jobs roll away on another man's truck. And Charlie watched from the window, and Shane made his face very still and told the boy it was going in for repairs. "Is it, though?" Charlie asked at dinner. "1 egg tonight." Shane had put it on the boy's plate. "Is it what?" "Going in for repairs." Charlie pushed the egg back to the middle of the table. "And you have to eat it where I can see you. Andre told me that's the rule now. You have to eat it where somebody can see you, or it doesn't count." The boy's jaw was set exactly like his grandfather's. "I know we don't have money, Dad. I'm 9. I'm not a baby. I know about the food bank. I know you didn't eat. You don't have to make it not real for me. It's already real. I just want you to eat." Shane Delaney looked at his son pushing an egg across a table, and something he'd been holding up with his bare back for 8 months started to come down. The interview was the Tuesday after they took the truck. A real one. Maintenance lead at a distribution center in the city, 40 minutes each way. The first live human, yes, come in and see us, he'd gotten in 8 months of applying. He'd arranged a ride to a park and ride halfway, and then the ride fell through at the last minute, and he'd stood at that park and ride in his good shirt, with his resume in a folder, and watched the clock tick past the appointment. 40 minutes from a job he could have done in his sleep, and no way on God's earth to get there. He called to reschedule and got a voicemail, and he knew from the shape of the voicemail what it meant. That was the thing nobody printed in the folder they hand you when the plant closes. How fast a man with no vehicle in a town with no buses falls right off the edge of the map. The truck had never been a truck. It had been the last thread, and he'd spent it on 2 carts of groceries for a woman he'd known for 20 minutes. And then, on Sunday, his father found out everything. It happened the way it always does. Small, and then all at once. Hank came for dinner, and there was no truck in the driveway, and Hank was a man who noticed, and one thing led to another, and to the pantry receipt Shane had been careless enough to leave on the counter, and to the whole 8 months of it spilling out in the kitchen, while Charlie pretended not to listen from the hall. Hank Delaney did not yell at first. That was the frightening part. He got very quiet, and very upright, and he set down his fork. "You've been lying to me since March. Dad, you lost the plant in March, and you've sat at my table every Sunday since and lied to my face." His voice was climbing now, 40 years of steel in it. "And that's not even the part. The part is, a man told me, a man at the Union Hall thought I knew, that my son gave away his last $200 to some woman he met in a food bank line. His truck money, gave it to a stranger." Hank stood up. "While my grandson eats 1 egg for supper, have you lost your mind, Shane? A Delaney doesn't take charity, and he sure as hell doesn't play the big man handing out his last dime to strangers while his own boy goes without. What is wrong with you? She was starving, Dad. Her kid, your kid." The old man's hand came down on the table. "Your kid is the one that's yours to feed. You want to be a hero to the boy in this house. Instead, you're broke, and you're proud about being broke, and you dressed it up as charity so you wouldn't have to feel like exactly what you are, which is a man who can't provide." He was breathing hard. "I raised you better than this. I raised you to stand on your own 2 feet. You want to know why I didn't tell you?" Shane's voice was shaking now. "This. Exactly this. The face you're making right this second. I've had it aimed at me inside my own head every single day for 8 months. I did not need it in stereo. You needed to tell the truth. I needed my father. The words came out raw. There's a difference, Dad, and you never once learned it, because to you, they were always the same thing, love and a paycheck, a man's worth and a man's wallet. Well, I don't have the wallet anymore. His voice cracked clean through. So I guess the rest of it's gone too. And there it was, out loud at last. The exact accusation Shane had spent 8 months starving to keep from hearing, aimed now at the one man he'd built his whole life to please. For a moment, Hank had no steel for it, but he was 68, and 40 years don't bend in one kitchen, and some cruel, exhausted part of Shane still believed the old man might be right, so he didn't have the fight left to push it. He just went hollow. Get out, Dad, Shane said quietly. Please, just go home. Hank went, and Shane sat alone at his table with one cold egg and a wallet with a union pin and $11 in it. And for the first time since March, he let himself believe he had failed all the way down. He'd lost the job. He'd lost the truck. He'd starved himself gray. He'd given away his family's last lifeline to a stranger, and his own father had looked at him and seen a beggar playing at being a saint. Charlie came and sat next to him without the word and leaned against his arm, and that nearly finished him because the boy shouldn't have had to be the strong one, and yet here he was, 9 years old, holding his father up. Grandpa's wrong, Charlie said into the dark. Don't talk about your grandpa like that. He is, though. The boy's arms were crossed. You're not a beggar. You bought Andre's whole family food when we don't even have any. I'm mad about the truck, but you're not a beggar. He frowned, working at it with everything a 9-year-old has. Beggars take stuff. You gave stuff. So, which one are we, Dad? And Shane, who did not have an answer, held his son in a cold kitchen and understood that the boy had just asked the only question that had ever mattered. Take or give, and which one are we? And that Shane had been getting it wrong his whole life, and his father before him, all the way back down the line. That was the bottom. What turned it wasn't a rich man's check or a stranger's secret. It was the two boys, and it was a woman named Simone Carver, who did not, it turned out, let a debt like Shane's go unpaid. Not because she could pay it back in money, but because she'd learned something Shane's own father had forgotten. She'd heard about the truck. Andre and Charlie were thick as thieves now, and 9-year-olds cannot keep a secret. And the whole story of the repossession and the terrible Sunday reached Simone by Monday. And Simone Carver, who had nothing, went to work with what she did have. She started at the pantry. She found Sandra Vaughn, the woman with her hand on the cart, who had watched the whole first scene and hadn't stopped thinking about it since. And Simone said, "You know that man who bought 2 carts? He's about to lose everything. And your line out there is full of people he's exactly like. What if we did it back?" "Did what back?" Sandra said. "Reversed it. One time." What if the pantry, for one day, wasn't about the limit? What if it was about him? And Sandra Vaughn, who had spent 20 years being the human face of not enough, who rationed because if she didn't, the shelves were bare by 10 and the 40 families at the back got nothing, who had made herself hard as a survival skill and hated every day of it, felt the hard thing in her chest crack for the first time in a long while. "I ration because I have to," she said, quietly, like a confession. "You understand that. Every day I look somebody in the eye and I say, that's the limit. And I watch them put the Tiger cereal back, and it is killing me. And I do it because it's the only way this place survives. You're asking me to... I'm asking you to let a community be bigger than its limit for one day," Simone said. "You've been holding scarcity by yourself for 20 years, Sandra. Let some other people hold something for once." Sandra was quiet, a long moment. 20 years I've been the one who says no," she said. "You know what that does to a person? You start to believe the no. You start believing there's just not enough, that it's the law of the world and your whole job is to divide the not enough as fair as you can and watch their faces while you do it. She looked at her thin shelves. What you're describing is the opposite religion. I don't know if I believe in it. You don't have to believe in it. You just have to open the door on Saturday and see who shows up. So they opened the door, and Simone Carver did the other thing she was good at, which was ask. She who could not stand to be asked for herself. She went to the Union Hall where Shane's father's old locals still met on Thursdays, and she stood in front of a room of men who'd never laid eyes on her. And she said, "One of yours is going under, and he's too proud to say so, and his boy is eating 1 egg for supper, and that man gave me his last $200 to feed my kids. I'm not here for me. I'm here for him. What are you going to do about it?" And a thing happened that Shane would not have believed if you'd sworn it to him. The room did not look away. An old-timer in the back said, "Whose boy?" And Simone said, "Hank Delaney's boy, Shane." And a murmur went through the hall, because half of them had known Hank 40 years, poured steel beside him, buried people with him. The old-timer stood up slow. "Hank Delaney's grandson is eating 1 egg for his supper," he said. And none of us knew? Like it was a personal insult, which, in the economy of that room, it was. "That's getting fixed by Saturday." They held it that Saturday at the pantry, and they called it a supper. Just a supper, a long table, everybody bring what you can. And the thing that Simone knew, that Hank had forgotten and Shane had never learned, is that people who have almost nothing will still, given half a reason, empty their cabinets for one of their own. The word went out through the exact network that had carried the story of Shane's ruin. The Union Hall, the pantry line, the 2 boys' whole school. And it came back as casseroles and grocery bags and an envelope with cash in it that nobody signed, and a mechanic who said he could get Shane a beater to drive to the city, and a guy who knew a guy who was hiring. Shane didn't want to go. Of course he didn't. "I'm not going to sit there and be everybody's charity case," he told Simone on the phone, the old iron in him, his father's voice in his own mouth. "That's the whole thing I've been trying not to be." "It's not charity," Simone said. "You of all people should know the difference by now. Come Saturday. Bring Charlie. And Shane, bring your dad." "My dad and I aren't exactly—" "Bring your dad." The supper is where it turned, and it turned on the children. The long table was full. Pantry families, union men, Sandra at the head of it looking like a woman watching a thing she'd stopped believing in come back to life. Shane came because Charlie made him, and he stood at the edge, stiff with the shame of it. And Hank came because Charlie called his grandfather himself and said, "You have to come, Grandpa, and you have to eat where I can see you." And the old man did not know what that meant, but he came. Shane nearly left 3 times before the food came out. It was one thing to be the man who gives. It was another thing entirely to sit at a table and be the reason a whole room had shown up carrying casserole dishes. To be the one on the receiving end, the one being helped, the exact thing his father had spent a lifetime teaching him to dread being. He got as far as the door once, coat in hand. Simone caught him there. "Where are you going?" "I can't do this, Simone. All these people looking at me like..." "Like what?" "Like I'm a charity case. Nobody in this room is looking at you like that." She stepped in front of the door, small and immovable, Sandra's own trick. "You know what they're looking at you like? Like you're one of theirs. There's a difference between pity and belonging, Shane. And if you'd ever once let yourself sit on this side of the table, you'd know it in your bones." She didn't move. "You let my boy feed me. Let these people feed yours. That's not weakness. That's the whole deal. That's the only deal there ever was." And Shane Delaney hung up his coat. When everyone sat and the food went around, the 2 boys did the thing they had cooked up between them because they'd compared notes and discovered they had the same father in 2 different houses. Andre stood up on his chair. Charlie stood up on his. "Nobody eats," Andre announced, in the ringing voice of an 8-year-old delivering an ultimatum, "until the moms and dads eat first, where we can see them." "Those are the rules now," Charlie said. "You have to eat it where somebody can see you. or it doesn't count. There was a silence, and then a ripple of soft, broken laughter down the long table. The kind of laughter that's holding hands with weeping because half the parents in that room had said I already ate to a child that very week. It is a particular thing to sit in a room full of people who have all been quietly starving in separate kitchens, and to have two children stand up on two chairs and refuse to let the lie go on for one more meal. Nobody had planned it. Nobody had ever said the shame out loud before. You don't when you're the one carrying it. You assume you're the only one, that everybody else is managing fine, that the hunger is a private failure with your name on it. And then an 8-year-old announces the rule and you look down the length of the table and see it land on every adult face at once, the recognition, the being seen, and you understand for the first time that you were never the only one. You were just the only one who was sure you were. And Simone Carver picked up a fork with her hand shaking and looked at her son standing on a chair with his arms crossed and his chin like a little judge, and she ate where he could see her. And across the table, Shane Delaney picked up his fork, and Charlie watched him like a hawk. And Shane ate, really ate, the first full meal he'd let himself have in longer than he could remember, where his son could see him. And Hank Delaney watched his son eat at a table full of people who'd emptied their cabinets for him and watched his grandson stand on a chair to make it happen. And something in the old man that had been set like cured steel for 40 years finally gave. He stood up. The table quieted. I need to say a thing to my boy, Hank said, and I'd just as soon do it where people can see me since that seems to be the rule tonight. His voice wasn't steady. Shane, I told you a Delaney doesn't take charity. I've told you that your whole life. I told it to you so hard you starved yourself gray rather than let me find out you needed help. He reached into his pocket and took out something small, and Shane saw it was his father's own union pin, the twin of the one in Shane's wallet. There's a thing I never told you. The winter you were 2, I was hurt on the line, out 11 weeks, no pay. We'd have lost the house. We'd have lost you. To the county, maybe. And you know what fed you that winter? Not me. I couldn't. The local fed you. The brothers. They passed the hat, and they filled our cabinets, and they would not let me say a word of thanks, because... His voice broke. Because that's what the pin means. That's what it always meant. I let you think it meant, I don't need anybody. It never meant that. It means nobody stands alone. A union's just a bunch of people who agreed not to let each other go under. I took charity, son. I took it with both hands, one whole winter, so that you could eat. And then I spent 30 years too proud to tell you, and I damn near let my pride starve my own grandson. He was crying now, openly, an old steel worker at a folding table. You didn't dishonor the pin when you filled those carts. You're the only one of us who ever understood what it was for. He came around the table and he pressed his pin into Shane's hand, next to the one Shane already carried, so that his son held 2, and he put his arms around him. And Shane Delaney finally, at 38, let himself be held up by his father instead of holding up a lie. The room did the thing rooms of working people do when they've witnessed something too big to clap for. It got quiet, and then somebody started passing the food again, because that's how people like this honor a moment. They feed it. And Sandra Vaughn stood at the head of the table with tears cutting down a face that hadn't allowed them in years, looking out at a long table where everybody was eating, where everybody could see them, and at shelves that were somehow fuller at the end of the night than the start, because people who had almost nothing had still, each of them, left a little. She'd been running the arithmetic wrong for 20 years, she realized. Scarcity divides. This multiplied. She had been so busy being fair with the not enough that she had never once tried the other thing. Open the door and see who shows up. It did not fix everything, because that isn't how it works. But it turned everything. Shane took the beater the mechanic fixed up, and it got him to the city, and the guy who knew a guy came through. And by spring, Shane Delaney had a job again. Not the plant, that was gone forever, but a job. Honest and enough. He paid people back who wouldn't take it, and when they wouldn't, he did what he was finally learning to do, which was let it stand, and pay it sideways instead of back. The first man Shane ever helped at Sandra's new shelves was a laid-off foundry hand with a boy about Charlie's age and a face Shane knew like a mirror. The cap pulled low, the 20 minutes stalling in the parking lot, the whole liturgy of shame. Shane didn't make a speech. He walked over and said, "First time? Come on, I'll walk you through it. There's no line at these shelves, and there's no limit, and nobody's keeping a tally. You take what you need today. Some other day, when you're back on your feet, you leave what you can. That's the whole thing." And the man's shoulders came down an inch, the way Shane's own had come down once at a folding table, and Shane thought, there it is. That's what the pin was always for. He just had to lose everything he owned to finally learn to read it right. He didn't marry Simone Carver, if that's the tidy ending you're bracing for. Real life is slower and stranger than that. But the two families braided together the way struggling families do when they've seen each other all the way down. The boys grew up more like brothers than not. There were a lot of Sunday dinners, and at every one of them there was enough food, and every adult at the table ate where the children could see them, because Andre and Charlie enforced the rule with the gravity of small tyrants, and nobody ever wanted them to stop. Sandra Vaughn changed the pantry, not all at once, and not without fights with a board that worried about running out. But she changed it. She put up a second set of shelves by the door, and over them a hand-painted sign that said, "Take what you need, leave what you can." And it turned out that when you treat people like they're part of something instead of like a line to be managed, an astonishing number of them, even the poorest, leave a little. The shelves stayed full more often than they went empty. Simone helped her run it. It became less a place you went in shame and more a place you went, period. The way you go to a well, because that's where the water is, and everybody needs water, and there's no disgrace in a well. And Hank Delaney spent the last good years of his life down at that pantry 2 days a week, a proud old man handing out food and telling anybody who'd hold still the true story of the pin, the one about the winter the brothers fed his boy, until the whole town knew that taking a hand up wasn't the opposite of standing on your own 2 feet. It was how you got back on them. He told it best on the coldest days when the line was longest. How a union was never a logo on a jacket or a line on a check. It was just the oldest idea working people ever had, which is that alone you're a single twig, and together you're a bundle nobody can snap. He'd say it to the young ones especially, the laid-off men with their caps pulled low and their pride worn like an open wound, the ones who reminded him of his own son in the worst winter of both their lives. Take the food, he'd tell them. Then come back in the spring and stack the shelves. That's not charity going out one door and charity coming in the other. That's a bundle. You're part of the bundle now, whether you meant to be or not. You always were. You just forgot for a while. On the wall of the Delaney kitchen now there hangs a shadow box, and in it are 2 union pins side by side, the local number worn smooth on both. Charlie will get them someday. When he does, Shane will tell him what they mean, and he'll get it right this time. The way it took 3 generations to get it right, not I don't need anybody, the other thing, the true thing. Nobody stands alone. And nobody, not a tired mother, not a proud father, not a laid-off man running on coffee and stubbornness. Nobody eats alone anymore in that kitchen, or lies about it either, because the children are watching. They were always watching, and the rule, it turns out, was never really about the food. You have to eat where somebody can see you. That's the whole thing. That's how they know you're still here, and that you're gonna let them keep you here. It counts now in that house. All of it counts. And no one, not once, ever says I already ate again.